Well, welcome back to the second part of this interview here with Luke Beasley. If you watched the last one, you heard Luke's amazing story. You just got a snippet, all the things that him and Ashley went through to get to where they're at today. If you didn't watch it, I will link it up here in the card, and you can go back and watch the first session of just our conversation today. Let's jump into one of the topics that came out of that discussion, and that was your first business, the water treatment business. Give us a little bit of history on how did you get into that? What were your emotions on the front end of getting involved in that business?
I guess water treatment is an okay business. So what we did was the business, I guess, treated water. Yeah. So we created distilled water.
Okay.
This business model had two distillers, and so they would distill the water, and then people can come in with 5-gallon jugs or 3-gallon jugs, 1-gallon jugs. We had a sink, and they could fill up from there and it'd go right from the tanks. And then we had 3 trucks that would do a water delivery business on that. So just like reverse osmosis or Deer Park or Crystal,
right,
those type of companies.
So it was like treatment and distribution? Like you would get it and then you distribute it out to, okay, makes sense.
So what got me into it, before I joined the military, I actually, I'm from New Mexico, so I was working for a company that did this, the same exact concept, just on a bigger scale. They had tons of trucks and stuff. I was more on the coffee delivery route. And so seeing how the plant operated and seeing like the behind the scenes and then fixing certain things, I was like, oh, I could do this. I never left there thinking, oh, I'm going to start a business like this. But when the approach came for purchasing this business and even inquiring about it, I was like, oh, I can do this. You know, like this is easy. You know, it's already established. This is easy. We can figure it out. Lo and behold, there was a few mistakes that we made off the top. Went in with a partner. Never had done a partnership before. And so that would be number one, like avoid partnerships until you're mature enough to know how to set up a contract for how the roles are done, you know, who does what, you know, how is accountability held, how is, you know, if one wants to leave, you know, how does that exit plan, that strategy look? And then just, it was a mess of trying to figure it out. You know, I was 26 at the time when I did it, and so, you know, I'm only 30 now. I was 26 at the time when I did it, and so my drive to be an entrepreneur was brand new, but it was so big that, you know, I didn't pay attention to my role. So I was a vice president, was my role, and then there was another guy, Remy, who was the CEO. And then, so his role technically would be the one that would do, so I was more operations, he would make the day-to-day decisions, stuff like that. But it just got to a point where I was like, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm gonna make the decisions. And then there was this immediate conflict, you know. But I would say, you know, I was handed like, hey, you are in charge of the books and doing this stuff. You do day-to-day operations and stuff like that. So at that point, I felt like, well, if I'm doing these things and I'm operating in these, you know, roles, and he's not potentially, then I have more insight. So I feel like I should make the decision on that. So a lot of lessons. There was tons of things learned that even break it down even more.
But I've had a few partnerships in different businesses, and some of them were great, and some of them were not great.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying is something that I could echo in those experiences is you need to set expectations on the front end.
Always.
When you go into a partnership.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't, there's consequences.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, major
consequences. And so if you set them on the front end, and I love how you identified role clarity, what is each person responsible for how long, by when, and what happens if you don't want to do that anymore? Yeah. What is the out? What's the exit ramp?
Yeah.
I think anybody who is potentially thinking about a partnership or going into a partnership, those are all things you want to think of. Now, to the point of partnerships, if you could go back and have a conversation with yourself, what else would you have told yourself about, hey, you're about to enter into this agreement, looking down into the future?
Before we bought it?
Before you bought it, this could go wrong. What else would you have told yourself in that partnership?
I probably would have told myself that at that time frame in our lives, and I'm a risk taker. I've always compared myself to Star Trek, you know. You've got Captain Kirk who just runs off his gut. And if anyone's seen Star Trek, you know how this all plays out. Then you've got people that are like Spock, that are like rule followers, or they like to do things by the regulations. And then you got the captain who's in charge is like, we'll figure it out as we go. Let's just shoot these bad guys, and then if something happens, we figure it out. And we have our team to do all that. I think I would come back and say it's probably more important at that time frame in my life to manage the family versus trying to take a risk and figure things out. And that's where the whole Star Trek thing. Instead of taking a risk and like jumping and not knowing what you're doing, and not having team or resources. That was the other big thing, is we didn't have resources in the bank to overcome a lot of these issues that we kept running into with this business. It's just look at your surroundings. I would have told myself, you have a 2-year-old or 3-year-old at the time, I don't remember. We're about to have a second child. You just got out of the military. The stability in the family was more important than trying to chase an entrepreneurial dream or a business dream. Though the risk could have been good if things were different, and it could have paid off if you had the right stuff in line. But I would probably say, hey, just hold up. Like, let's think through some stuff. Let's not get caught up on the emotional decision or the emotional hype that, this is right. Like, because that's what it is. Most people make dumb decisions because they're caught up on the emotions. They're that's like, right. oh, this is going to be amazing. And as a visionary myself, and a very extreme optimistic visionary, I'm like, we're going to be amazing. Like, we're going to be millionaires in 6 months. It's going to be fantastic. But you don't know what you don't know yet. And right. I would have just said, hey, let's bring stability into this first, learn a little bit more about it, and make the wife happy. And I should have listened to Ash. I mean, she was kind of more like yes, but then no at the same point. Like, she didn't want to do that. And I think that was my first valuable lesson, is listening to the spouse is more important than chasing your own dreams, because they're sensing things from a whole entire different direction. The wife they want stability more than anything. I think they understand the dreams and stuff, but to them, I think most women in a marriage probably want stability more than anything. They want to know that income's coming in, and bills are paid, and food is there on the table, and then we can start going down this path of different things. But to get out of the military, where we both were in, and we had health insurance and money and stability, then to the unknown, that was fun. But we both learned a lot. But I was just glad it was at 26.
Right, yeah. Fail early. Fail often, and then get your stuff together.
Maybe probably, knowing my personality, I probably would have preferenced, but like, hey, don't do these things, but you could fail early right now and learn a lot. And why not? Let's try it out. And that's where the Kirk side would come in, like, give it a shot.
Yeah, and I think that the point that I wanted to kind of guide us to, which I just knew based on your experiences, is a lot like some of my first business experience, is that the excitement is so high it blinds us.
Oh yeah.
Right? Especially if you have an optimistic personality. Now, you might be in a marriage where your wife is passionate and running through every door, and you might be the cautious type. Or you might be the opposite. You might be a husband who's passionate and running through the door, and the wife is the cautious type. Opposites attract. And one of the things we've talked about in the past is my wife, Lindsay, is a lot like your wife, Ashley. They are structured, and they weigh things out, and they look at both sides. And we would we would do well to lean into that and say, okay, you're right. I'm not looking at the consequence here. So if you're young, and if you are hair on fire, running through every door in front of you, maybe listen to some of the people in your life. Maybe sit down and think of what are the consequences of failure here. Because I think for your business, for my first couple businesses, if I would have sat down and said, how's the consequences going to affect my family long term? There's probably some decisions I wouldn't have made.
Yeah.
Being led by emotion. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have done it all together, but there's some decisions I wouldn't have made being led by emotion. And you said it earlier, that's where maturity comes in. The more mature we get, and maturity isn't just with age. I've met a lot of older people who don't have that built in yet because they haven't had the same experiences. The more mature we get, the more wisdom we bring into those experiences. And so now in your business, you probably combat some of the same problems, but you bring that level of wisdom to them because of what you've lived through.
Yeah.
So take me to the sell of the water business. Okay, so you got in, you didn't really have clear
The purchase
roles.
or the sell? There was no sell.
Oh, that's right.
We
Yeah,
walked out.
You said you locked the door and walked out.
Literally walked the door and walked out.
So you didn't have clarity in the roles. Your emotions got the best of you. You were a little bit excited. Tell me about turning that key and locking the door and walking away.
It's still, I mean, it's been almost since 2011, what, 14 years ago, I think. Is that 14? Were we in 2025?
Yeah, come 14, yeah.
I remember the day walking out, and I remember grabbing the computer because it had QuickBooks on it and we needed some of that stuff. I mean, when we bought the business, it was doing 40 grand a month. We had 11, 13 employees, I forget, three vehicles that were doing deliveries. And when we shut the doors 14 months later, it was possibly doing maybe $11,000 or $12,000 a month with a $3,500 rent payment on where we were at. And then we were down to one employee who was doing deliveries. I had to jump in and do deliveries. I had to let everyone else go. There was times I couldn't pay people. I'll never forget that first time I told people I couldn't pay them. I mean, that was probably the most, and I'm not confrontational, but that was probably one of the most embarrassing probably moments that I've ever had, because it's like they're coming to work and they're expecting the reward of coming to work for a week or two is a paycheck.
To get paid, yeah.
And then to not have the money come in or set aside or know how to do that effectively, because I didn't have a bookkeeper. It was me doing it and just trying to figure things out. I mean, I wasn't paying taxes like 941s on people's paychecks. You know, like I was like, you know, it's just, there was so much. This whole story, this could be like multiple hours worth of podcasting. Yeah, it was just so much. So by the time we and then our machines were breaking down, the distillers were 20 something years old. And so in the distillation process, there's plates that have to get replaced out because the water goes through there and it ends up corroding, like city water, tap water. And then you just got to replace the stainless steel and the different things in there. So you take these plates out and you put new ones in and different things. I would have changed business models. I would have done the reverse osmosis versus distilled water. I always joke with Ashley, I was like, let's open up another water business. I think I've learned everything I need to. I think we could do good this time.
What's her response?
No.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, kind of
she never wants to relive that moment again, or that business model ever again. It was just one thing after another, and I think we finally, you know, with Brianna, she was born December of 2009, and then we shut down in 2010. So she would be back behind the counter in her car seat while Ash is doing the front counter. And then Olivia, our oldest, was in my office watching Dora the Explorer and then eating a box of donut holes from Dunkin' Donuts, which was in the same parking lot. It was just eventually we're like, we're not getting ahead. We were maybe bringing home $200 every week for us, for our paychecks. Things were just falling through the cracks, the lawsuits, different things like that. Of course, we're suing the corporation, not us directly. It was just like, we're done. Like we couldn't even, there was a couple of times we couldn't even pay the rent. Yeah. And so I'd have to call the previous owners who I was on a month-to-month paying them back for their business. That's a whole nother thing as well too. And I would call up Allison and be like, hey, the landlord came and locked the door. Like I can't get in. She's like, you have to pay rent. And I was like, yeah, I'm like $3,500 or whatever the fees and all that stuff was. So she would write a check because she needed the business to be open. Yeah. And then she would get the doors open and then we would get in there. But I have customers coming to the door. They're seeing us failing and, so it was a lot of stuff. So eventually we just said, we just can't handle this mentally probably anymore or whatever. And we were like, we just gotta get out. And then we just shut business down that one day. And I do remember locking the door for the final time, computer in hand, and then walking out to the car, and then that was like, we just didn't go in the next day, and the next day, and the next day. It was very interesting.
But number one, you're here now, which is great. Woo! Okay, yeah. We pop out of that. We're here now. We're all safe.
Yeah.
But you named that season. You said that in our last episode. You named that season. What did you guys name that season?
Our fantastic failure season.
Your fantastic failure season.
Yeah, it was the best way to fail. I don't know. That's crap. It was the worst way to fail. But I'm trying to be all like
honesty. We
good
love it.
here.
Yeah.
It was the worst way to fail, But I'm glad it happened at 26. I think every business owner needs a failure or two. I think in order to grow exponentially, you need some failures, because you realize I can't do business this way, or I got to shift up things and do it a different way, or you just need someone to speak into your life on the whys of how you failed.
That's right.
And then you just need to take a couple years of breathing and then get back into it. I was just listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago, and I wish I would have realized this, but this is just for future. If you're going to fail at something, it's better to fail small and low, at small things, and try it out before you get crazy and invest a bunch of stuff into something like money or resources, and then you fail big time. Lessons can be learned in both, but it's a lot less painful and cheaper to fail at really small things if you're trying something out versus going all in like we did.
So failure is necessary.
Absolutely.
It's a learning opportunity. But if you can fail often and fail small, so you can keep learning, so you can grow, is better than a huge failure, even though that can also be beneficial, even though you can also bring lessons out of the season like you were in.
Yeah, every person should fail and not be afraid of failure. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to us moving forward in the future. Something's not going to work right, or we're going to fail at something. It's just for us now moving forward, it's like, how much can we minimize that failure? How, minimize that impact on us versus going crazy and doing something dumb and then we fail big time where we're not learning our lesson. So, but yeah, I highly encourage everyone to fail, because it provides a perspective needed for the future.
And you want to glean the lesson, but you don't want to focus on it for too long.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because you're ready to move on to the next thing. You're ready to get on to the next lesson. Love that. Great insight. So after you walk away from the business, you're sitting in debt. How much?
We were 86 grand in debt. Probably had 15 collectors phoning us. And so, that week after we shut down, I think it was about a week or two after we shut down, obviously we realized we needed income. So that's when I reached out to a friend of mine and I said, hey, can you take me on? I know exactly where I was sitting, where we had the meeting at. It was the Park Lane, the pub down in Hampton, over there. And I was sitting there, and him and I were talking and stuff, and he's like, yeah, I'll bring you on, try it out and see what happens. And so it was probably like a week, maybe 10 days later, had a job and was able to start working and stuff like that. But that was barely $600 every 2 weeks. And that company struggled to pay people on time too. So now I'm kind of getting a taste of my own medicine in that regard. It wasn't all the time that I didn't pay people. It was a few moments. So yeah, I'll never forget when I changed my phone number, because that was probably the first time in 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, that I had instant peace. Because bill collectors are calling you every day. You look at the phone, I'm like, oh, that's USA. Oh, that's Yellow Pages. Oh, that's taxes. That's so-and-so. And then I changed my phone number, and
stopped.
Everything stopped. And I know exactly who I was with, sitting, everything, actually at a Texas Roadhouse in Chesapeake.
Really?
Sitting in their parking lot, yeah. That was an awesome moment.
Now the call stopped, but you still had to do the work.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Yeah,
you still had to do the work, because you're sitting here under this massive pile of debt, and these individuals looking for you. So I'll tell you what, tomorrow we're going to talk about how you and Ashley did the work and how you moved from there, and how those lessons have impacted many people's lives. I know from personal experience of people that I've seen you guys help or teach, how you went from where you were to where you are. So we'll cover that tomorrow. I hope that was very helpful for you. Whether you're starting your first business, you're in your first business, or you too learned lessons from your first business, I'd love for you to share that with others, just like Luke is sharing it with us. We'll see you tomorrow.